Hi everybody, I'm Janaea and welcome back here to my channel. Thank you for joining me today. And this evening I was really feeling inspired to share with you the 5 principles, or Gokai as they are called in Japanese, of Reiki. Now some of you may already be familiar with Reiki. If you're not, when you break down the word Reiki in Japanese, Rei means spirit and Ki means energy. So it's essentially spirit energy. Some people refer to it as source energy, universal energy. But it's energy that we all have access to, that we can all tap into. Well, along with the learning of Reiki that came about in the early 1920s, in 1922, with Dr. Mikao Usui, when he had his own personal enlightenment during that time, he also developed the Reiki Gokai, or principles to live by. And it's a very, very simple mantra that we can share with ourselves throughout the day to help us to stay centered, help us to kind of remain balanced, and help us to not react to all of the plethora of things that we have to react to out in the world, right? I mean, you don't have to go far to have something that you can get really worked up about pretty quickly, whether that's at work, in your home, on the news, on YouTube, wherever you happen to be. There's a lot going on in the world right now. And there's a lot of very intense energy. So anything that we can do to kind of help bring us back to a grounded center space, I feel is a good thing and be really helpful. And that's probably why I'm feeling inspired to do this, not just for you, but also to remind myself about these principles as well, right? So let's jump right into them. What you're going to hear me do today is I'm going to share them with you in Japanese, and then also in English. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to share them with you 3 times in a row in Japanese only. And in between, I want to share with you actually some notes that I wrote several years ago when I was taking my Jikiden Reiki training. And I had thought about, I could change these notes around a little bit. And as I was reading it this evening, I was like, no, everything that I would really want to share about these principles is already written perfectly in my notes, so there's not anything that needs to be altered with that. Now, you've heard me use the word Jikiden several times already. And just so you know, Jikiden Reiki is basically, it's the closest, purest form of Reiki that we can get to what was actually taught by Dr. Usui in the 1920s. The word Jikiden means directly taught, directly handed down. So in this case, directly handed down from teacher to student without alteration. So when the student learns the practice, they then move on to practice it just as they were taught from their teacher without changing anything or making any modifications. Now, in a future video, I will talk more about the history of Reiki, but right now let's focus more on the principles so that we can understand just very simple ways that we can help ground ourselves and center ourselves in this very intense world that we're living in. So speaking of that, let's go right into it. And the Reiki principle starts off with talking about just today. We want to be focused on just this now moment, not something that happened before or something that we think might happen in the future, but just for today. So just for today. In Japanese, it's kiyodake wa. Do not get angry, Ikaru. Do not worry, Shin, suna. Be grateful, kanshaste. Work hard, gyo hagime. And be kind to others, Hetoni Shinsetsuni. So it's very simple things to just get present in the moment. So in my notes, I had written down here, and I'm just going to read it to you how I have it because I feel like that is clear already on its own. But I wrote down, you can get rid of your anger and worry by being grateful. I mean, how often do we take a few moments during our day to just be in a place of gratitude and remember that there's so much, even with all the challenges that we've been through over these past couple of years, there is so much still to be grateful for. So how can we turn our attention back to that? I wrote, we cannot afford to have a condition for happiness. There's not, if we spend all of our time saying, well, I'm only going to be happy if this happens for me, if we get to stop wearing masks, if everybody does everything that the government says to do, if they open up stores the way that they used to be, or if they take away all of these restrictions, then I'm going to be happy again. Well, that's a condition on your happiness. And the Reiki Gokai are about finding that happiness already within you without placing any conditions on that happiness. So we learn to be grateful without conditions and just for gratitude's sake, just to be grateful because we're grateful. Whatever it is that we can be grateful for, without any expectations on that gratitude, right? Everything right now is just right as it is in this moment. I know that can be a tough one to hear, again, when we have so much that we've been through. And if we break it down to this very moment in time, it's just right as it is right now. We don't start to be concerned about things not being right as they are until we start projecting into the future, or unless we start comparing to the past and what was. And then we start to think that what's happening right now isn't right. It isn't good enough. If you're fighting with yourself, who's going to win? You won't win, for certain. If you're fighting internally with yourself over anything, then nobody's going to win, right? And you most certainly will not win. And the Gokai are about helping to stop that inner fight. So we need to make an effort to have an atmosphere of gratitude in your heart. It's much easier to be grateful. You have to actually work harder to be in another state, such as anger or worry. And I don't know, I mean, you probably have noticed this, or maybe you haven't noticed it yet, but if you take some time to really pay attention to the amount of energy that it takes for you to be in an angry state or in a worry state in comparison to the amount of energy that it takes for you to be in a state of gratitude, you're going to notice that there's a distinct difference. The energy of being in anger and worry or anxiety or fear is very draining. And when you start to pay attention to it, you may even start to notice how that energy is like physically just draining right out of your body. But once you start looking around your environment and your world and within yourself, and you start finding things that you could be grateful for, it's like it starts to feel that energy back up within you. It's kind of like filling up that inner cup, right? So if you do want to do something self-care wise or something like that, practicing the Gokai is certainly one step to help you with doing that. Wherever you are, you have brought that on yourself, I wrote here. Your soul has picked a path in order to enable it to grow. Your life is in your hands. That's a real tough one a lot of times for us to think about, right? And it's a very important one. You know, we need to remember that we have the ability to be able to decide how we want to be in this world. We may not be able to go out and right this second change every governmental law that there is or mandate or restriction or any of those things, but we can decide how we're going to show up even with those restrictions and mandates being in place. You know, we can decide how we're going to show up at work even if we are not in full agreement with all the policies, let's say, that a work environment has. So that is in our hands. So I have written down here also the word duties and saying taking responsibility, doing what you can fully. And this is in relationship to the principle under Gyo Hagime, to work hard. So you do your duties to the best of your ability. You take on your responsibilities and you fulfill them to the best of your ability each day or in each moment. You know, and as I've mentioned in another video, that your level of ability is going to change. Some days you're going to have more energy than other days and be able to fulfill even more duties and work even harder. And some days you may be more at 50% than 100%, but doing what you can as best as you possibly can. The first four principles, the do not anger, do not worry, be grateful, and work hard, are for your own healing. They're for you to be focused on you and taking care of you. And then when you're ready and you feel that inner cup has started to fill up for you, then you share this blessing with others. And that's the fifth principle, be kind to others. So I want to also make sure I mention something else, because I know That somewhere out there, there are some very, very, very knowledgeable people in the law of attraction who are sitting there saying, but Janaea, you said the word not. And if you look up the Reiki principles in English, that other people have come about and they have written the principles to not have the not be in there. Because we can't have the not because the universe doesn't hear no. The universe doesn't hear not. It's just going to hear you say, oh, you want to be angry. Oh, you want to be worried. That's why we learn it in Japanese. The original power and energy behind these Gokai were written in Japanese, right? So it's the Japanese language that carries that energy with it. And that's why we want to learn it in its original language. So yes, in English, I'm saying the word not, but in Japanese, I'm saying something different. And as it was taught to me, what I'm actually saying when I say the na, the don't, that this word goes from higher up to down. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you are a small child and your grandmother is teaching you a lesson. And she's saying, look, little one, you don't need to get angry. I've already learned that. I've already done that for you. You don't need to take that on. So I'm sharing the wisdom with you that I have learned in my life, that this is okay now. We can live differently now. I've already done this. So now there's not a need for you to. So it's carrying a different message. It's carrying a message of wisdom, like a teacher down to a student, a parent to a child, you know. So that's a different take than me saying it in English where I say not or don't, you know. So please, law of attraction folks, let's go ahead and recognize this difference right off the bat. So now I'm going to go in and say the Reiki Gokai only in Japanese. And I'm going to say it 3 times so you can hear it. And then you can practice for yourself anytime you choose to. And then we'll end for today. Kiyodaki wa Ikaru Shin suna Kanshashite Gyo hagime Hitoni Shinsatsu ni Kiyodaki wa Ikaru Shin suna Kanshashite Gyo hagime Hitoni Shinsatsu ni Kiyodaki wa Ikaru Shin suna Kanshashite Gyo hagime Hitoni Shinsatsu ni. Take care.